of you have come here today, not just the few thousand Corydonians, pretty good word, isn't it, Corydonians, but all Hoosiers, people from all over the state and from here and far who've come to Corydon, Indiana's real hometown. What I thought we might do today is travel back in time. We are here today in Corydon, Indiana in 2008, but let's go back 200 years and paint a picture of our town as it sprang to life. Be here again in 1808. And it's not something we'll have to close our eyes to imagine. The grass under our feet, the tree canopy above, this square block right in the heart of town. In many ways, Corydon is exactly the way it was then, in very many ways. The town's laid out with north and south running streets, east and west streets. It's exactly all those streets and all the lots around town, all still numbered exactly as they were when the town was laid out in 1808. It's the place where we are right now is probably a meadow, grassy place with trees. Here in the bottomland between Little Indian Creek and Big Indian Creek, with the South Hill behind us and West Hill over here and Pilot Knob beyond, and Cedar Hill up that way, in which most of the streets cascaded up that hill and became the residential area of Corydon. Just kind of pretty much the same way it was. I imagine there were a lot more undergrowth, and one of the things that the square here had was a fence, and it wasn't a fence to keep animals in, it was to keep them out, because animals roamed around town and things were a little rough and ready then. But it was a pretty much the same way as it is right now. And but I thought even before that we might go back and discover what was happening in the world. You know, what set the stage for the founding of Corydon in 1808? It's kind of an important part of this picture, I think. First of all, this was the western frontier of America. This little town, which would suddenly become important in history, was on the frontier, the very edge of western expansion. Now, when we think of the frontier, we maybe think of the movie Frontier, the Wild West, and Laramie and Tombstone and such places as that. But Corydon was on the beginning of America's move west. The Declaration of Independence was signed in 1776 as the American Revolution began. And we know who the founding brothers who were, the Washington and Jefferson and Hamilton and Adams and Madison and Franklin, and we know what the revolution was about. It was about independence. Well, one aspect of becoming free from British rule was getting out from under British restrictions, including the British decree, the rule of the Crown of England, that colonists could not establish new colonies, could not come across the Appalachian Mountains. When Daniel Boone took a group of settlers across through the Cumberland Gap in the 1770s to found Boonesboro in Kentucky, that was absolutely illegal. It was forbidden, and they were doing it anyhow. But the country was pretty bottled up. Now here's a little fact. At the time of the American Revolution, the largest city in the British Empire was London. The second largest city in the British Empire was Philadelphia, right here in this country. And this, the people on the eastern seaboard, the population had really boomed, and they were kind of bottled up. But when the war was over and the revolution was won, the right to cross the Alleghenies and the Appalachians and the westward expansion of the new United States just really began, and not willy-nilly, not here at least. The two very important things happened in the quarter century between the founding of the country and the founding of Corydon. The first was the Proclamation of 1785, which allowed for the accurate surveying and sale of land in new territories. Now, it doesn't sound like much to us now, but this was the world's first. I mean, it had always been dukes and kings and lords such and such in the manor, and ordinary people didn't own land. And that was in Europe. But here, and with the Proclamation of 1785, not only were there provisions for all the land to be surveyed, but for clear title to be made to that land, and and ownership recorded in the courthouse, as our courthouse records are here. You know, we've never had a fire, luckily, and all the records of all the ownership of all the land of Corydon and of Harrison County remain today. And that's kind of an important thing. That really had not happened previously before. And then 2 years later, in 1787, Congress passed the Northwest Ordinance, and that opened up all the land west of the Alleghenies and Appalachian Mountains, north of the Ohio River, clear to Canada, and all the way out to the Mississippi, comprising all the states of Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, Illinois, Wisconsin, and a little bit of Minnesota. A huge, huge chunk of land opened up for sale and ownership and for people to move into. Unsettled land and very good land, probably the best farming land in all of North America. And here it was. And here they came. We think about the Louisiana Territory, and which was explored in 1804, and how big that is. But the Northwest Territory was a pretty big place too, and it filled up. And many of the coming to Corydon would start up this little town that in just a few years would become a state capital. And these people, they came from the upland hill country of western Virginia and eastern Tennessee and Kentucky. They were kind of southern Appalachian people. And those people walked in. We had mentioned that earlier today by Mr. Goldman. Walked in, families who would walk in and somehow ferry across the Ohio River and settle on these first row of counties, this little land along the Ohio River. But others came down US 1, or the Ohio River. That's America's first great highway.